All right, so you want to understand this new clustering algorithm called DenMune,
Okay.
and you've shared a research paper with us
Yeah. Yeah.
as your source material.
Right.
So clustering itself is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's used everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
From
Image recognition.
image recognition, segmenting markets.
Yep.
But things get tricky when you have clusters that have strange shapes, different densities,
Absolutely.
or are just messy with a lot of noise.
Yeah, so much noise.
Algorithms that work perfectly
Right.
on one data set
Yeah,
might completely fail on another.
that's right.
Right.
And a lot of those algorithms need you to tweak
Yeah.
a lot of parameters.
Yeah.
Which can be,
Time consuming.
time consuming.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that makes DenMune so interesting. It claims to be
Right.
really robust and simple,
Mm-hmm.
needing only one parameter.
Okay, so that's a big deal
It is a big deal.
for speed and ease of use.
Yeah.
So how does DenMune actually work?
Well,
I was particularly intrigued by this idea of a voting system
yeah,
for the data points.
it is a clever approach.
Like they're holding elections to decide who gets to be the cluster centers,
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
which I thought was fascinating.
It's based on the idea of mutual nearest neighbors,
Okay.
or MNN.
MNN.
So
Okay.
think of it this way.
Right.
Each data point looks around and finds its K nearest neighbors,
Okay.
like forming a little group of friends.
Uh-huh.
If 2 points find each other in their respective groups,
Yeah.
they become mutual nearest neighbors.
Okay.
Essentially, they have friends in common.
Oh, so it's not just about
Yeah.
who you're closest to,
Right.
but who you share close friends with.
That's it.
Gotcha. Okay.
And DenMune uses this information to identify the popular data points, the ones with a lot of mutual friends.
Yeah.
These popular points become the seeds
Okay.
or starting points for our clusters.
Okay.
DenMune then goes through 2 phases
Oh.
to build the clusters.
So it's like a high school dance
Okay.
where the people with tons of friends in common
Yeah,
are more likely to end up dancing together in a group.
that's a great analogy.
So I'm seeing how this voting system could work.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me more about these 2 phases.
Right.
What happens in phase I?
So in phase I, DenMune focuses on those strong points,
Okay.
the ones with a high number of MNN votes,
Mm-hmm.
and uses them to build the basic structure of the clusters.
Okay.
What makes it interesting is that any data point with 0 votes,
Okay.
those wallflowers with no mutual friends,
Right?
are immediately discarded as noise.
Oh, so no more data party crashers.
No more party crashers.
Okay, I like how it gets rid of the outliers early on.
Right.
It seems like that would help with the whole
Yeah.
conservative clustering thing we were talking about.
It does.
So what happens to the less popular data points? The ones who might only have a few mutual friends.
So that's where phase 2 comes in.
Okay.
These weak points
Uh-huh.
try to join existing clusters
Okay.
based on their shared neighbors.
Okay.
It's almost as if they're looking at the existing groups and asking, hey, do I know anyone here?
Yeah.
If they find a cluster with a lot of shared neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
they're more likely to join that group.
It's like they're looking for a group that
Yeah.
already has some familiar faces.
Exactly.
So DenMune takes into account not just the initial popularity, but also the social connections between the data points.
Right?
I like how it tries to find the best fit for every data point.
Yeah.
But what about those loners
Yeah.
who can't find a cluster with enough shared neighbors?
Well, yeah, they are also labeled as noise.
Okay,
DenMune is careful about which points get to join a cluster.
gotcha.
And this actually leads into one of its major advantages.
All right.
By being so selective,
Uh-huh.
DenMune is very good at handling noise.
That makes sense. Yeah. The paper mentioned that DenMune is conservative when it comes to forming clusters.
Right.
So what does that mean exactly?
It means that DenMune is hesitant to create clusters,
Okay.
unless it's very confident about the connections between the data points.
Gotcha.
Remember, it prioritizes those strong points with lots of mutual neighbors, and it discards any outliers early on.
Right.
This built-in skepticism towards random connections is what makes DenMune less susceptible to noise.
So it's not easily fooled by random data points
Exactly.
that might happen to be close together, but don't have any real relationships.
Right.
Like having a bouncer at the club,
Yeah,
only letting in those who are on the list
that's right.
and have the right connection.
Precisely.
Okay. And this conservative approach really pays off when you're dealing with
Yes.
messy, real-world data
Especially.
where noise is a constant challenge.
Yeah.
Speaking of real-world data, the paper mentioned
Yeah.
comparing DenMune to a bunch of other algorithms.
Yes, they did.
9 to be exact.
Right.
They tested it on over 30 data sets.
Yeah, over 30 data sets.
Which sounds like a pretty comprehensive evaluation.
It was.
So I'm dying to know, how did DenMune perform?
Okay.
Was it the champion of the clustering competition?
It consistently scored very well.
Okay.
Even on those really tricky data sets with overlapping clusters or clusters with unusual shapes.
Okay.
For example, on the compound data set,
Okay.
which has clusters of different densities all packed together.
Mm-hmm.
DenMune did exceptionally well.
So it wasn't intimidated by a little crowding.
No, not at all.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
The paper also mentioned the path-based data set.
Yes.
Where the clusters form long, winding shapes.
Right.
Those always seem to trip up other algorithms.
They do.
How did DenMune handle those?
It excelled on those as well.
Okay.
The path-based data set is challenging.
Okay.
Because many algorithms struggle to identify clusters that aren't neatly separated.
Right.
Or that have irregular shapes.
Yeah.
DenMune's ability to handle these types of data sets is a testament to its robustness and adaptability.
This is all very promising.
It is promising.
We're starting to see why DenMune could be a valuable tool. But being the skeptical bunch that we are, I have to ask, are there any downsides?
Well, there are a couple things to keep in mind.
Okay.
First, DenMune needs your data to be in 2 dimensions.
Okay.
So if you have a data set with many features,
Yeah.
you'll need to reduce the dimensions first.
That doesn't sound too bad.
No.
There are techniques for that, right?
There are.
Like TSNE.
Exactly.
Which they mentioned using in the paper.
Yep.
Okay.
And second, if you have a very small data set, DenMune might not be the best choice.
Okay.
It needs enough data points to build its voting system effectively.
I see. So it's not ideal for those tiny data sets.
Yeah.
Where you only have a handful of points.
Right. Like trying to have a dance party with only 3 people.
Yeah, not much of a party, is it?
Not really, no.
Okay, one last question before we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We've been talking about all these neighbor calculations.
Yeah.
And I can't help but wonder about the speed.
Yeah.
Is DenMune going to be slower compared to other algorithms?
DenMune is surprisingly fast.
Okay.
Especially compared to some of the older, more complex algorithms. The paper even tested it on the huge MNIST data set.
Okay.
Which has thousands of images of handwritten digits.
Okay, that's impressive.
It is pretty impressive.
I'm always concerned about speed.
Right.
When it comes to algorithms.
Yeah.
So it's good to hear.
It is good.
That DenMune can handle large data sets efficiently.
It seems to be a good balance of speed and accuracy.
All right. That's all we have time for in this part of our DenMune deep dive.
Okay.
We've learned how it works.
Yeah.
Why it's unique.
How it measures up against the competition.
Right.
Be sure to join us next time as we dig even deeper into the fascinating details of this algorithm.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into DenMune.
Right.
We've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah, we have.
But I'm really eager to unpack those 2 phases of the algorithm in more detail.
Right.
They seem to be the heart of how DenMune builds its clusters.
You're absolutely right.
So remind me,
okay,
what exactly happens in phase I?
So phase I is all about establishing the core structure of the clusters.
All right.
DenMune takes those strong points, the ones with a lot of mutual nearest neighbors, and uses them as the initial seeds for our clusters.
Okay.
But it doesn't stop there.
Oh, okay.
DenMune carefully analyzes the connections between those strong points, looking at their shared neighborhoods to figure out which ones genuinely belong together in a cluster. So even though these strong points are all popular in the sense that they have many mutual neighbors, DenMune doesn't just lump them all together.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not just about popularity, but also about who you're popular with.
Gotcha.
DenMune uses those shared neighborhoods to draw the boundaries of the initial clusters. And of course, any data point that is totally isolated with no mutual neighbors is discarded right away as noise.
So it's like DenMune is building a foundation for its clusters. Carefully selecting the strongest, most well-connected points as the building blocks.
That's a great analogy.
But a foundation alone doesn't make a house.
And that's where phase 2 comes in.
All right, what happens in phase 2?
Phase 2 is all about building upon that foundation and fleshing out the clusters. Now it's the turn of the weak points.
Okay.
Those data points that didn't have enough mutual nearest neighbors to be considered strong points.
So these are the data points that weren't popular enough
Exactly.
to be cluster seeds,
Right.
but they still might belong to a cluster?
Precisely.
Okay.
In phase 2, DenMune goes through each of those weak points,
Okay.
one by one, and tries to assign them
Okay.
to an existing cluster.
Okay.
It does this by looking at the weak points nearest neighbors and seeing if those neighbors are already members of a cluster.
So it's like each weak point is holding a list of their friends and going from cluster to cluster, asking, do you know any of these people?
Exactly.
If a cluster has a lot of familiar faces, meaning the weak point shares several neighbors with members of that cluster, then DenMune will likely assign the weak point to that cluster.
That's right.
Okay, so DenMune isn't just about finding those initial cluster centers, but also about carefully and thoughtfully assigning all those other data points to the most appropriate cluster.
Yep.
And what if a weak point
Okay.
can't find a cluster with enough shared neighbors?
Then it's labeled as noise as well.
Okay.
DenMune is very particular about who gets to join a cluster.
I'm starting to see why DenMune is considered conservative in how it forms clusters. It really seems to prioritize those strong connections and avoids being swayed by random noise.
That's right.
And this conservative approach is one of the reasons why DenMune performs so well.
That's right.
Especially on those messy data sets.
Exactly.
Where noise is a big problem.
Yeah.
Speaking of performance.
Okay.
The paper mentioned that DenMune was compared to 9 other algorithms on over 30 data sets.
Yes.
Were there any specific results that really stood out to you?
Well, I was particularly impressed with its performance on the aggregation data set.
Okay.
This data set is challenging because it contains several clusters that are very close together and have irregular shapes.
Okay.
Many other algorithms struggle
Yeah.
to separate these clusters accurately.
Right.
But DenMune did a remarkable job.
So even when the clusters are practically on top of each other,
Right.
DenMune can still tease them apart.
It can.
That's pretty impressive.
It is.
And it highlights
Right.
one of the key strengths of DenMune. Its ability to identify clusters based on density.
Yes.
Rather than just distance.
Exactly.
Remember how we talked about how some algorithms struggle with clusters of different densities?
Right.
DenMune seems to handle that really well.
It does.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the value of DenMune.
Yeah.
It's robust. It's good at handling noise.
Yes.
And it can find those tricky clusters
Right.
that other algorithms miss.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away, I do want to go back to something you mentioned earlier.
Right.
The fact that DenMune needs the data to be in 2 dimensions.
Yes, that is one of its limitations.
Okay.
If you have a data set with a large number of features, you'll need to use dimensionality reduction techniques to get it down to 2 dimensions before you can use DenMune.
But you mentioned that the paper used TSNE for dimensionality reduction, right?
You did.
So it's not like this is a deal breaker?
Exactly. Dimensionality reduction is a common step in many data analysis tasks. So it's not unique to DenMune. There are many techniques available. And the choice of which one to use depends on the specific data set and the goals of the analysis.
Right. So while it's a limitation, it's not insurmountable.
Exactly.
And to be honest, I think it's a fair trade-off.
I agree.
For the benefits that DenMune offers.
It is.
And it's worth remembering that DenMune was specifically designed for data sets with 2 dimensions. It's not trying to be a general-purpose clustering algorithm that can handle any type of data. It has a specific niche. And it excels in that niche.
It does.
Okay, that's a good point. It's better to be really good at one thing than mediocre at many things.
Exactly.
But while we're talking about limitations, are there any other downsides to DenMune that we should be aware of?
One thing to keep in mind is that DenMune can be sensitive to the choice of the K parameter. Remember, K is the number of nearest neighbors that each data point considers when forming its little group of friends.
That's the one parameter that we need to choose when using DenMune. So how do we know what the best value of K is?
Unfortunately, there's no magic formula. The optimal value of K depends on the specific data set. And the problem you're trying to solve
So it sounds like we might need to experiment a bit.
You might.
To find the best value of K.
Yeah.
For our particular data set.
Right.
But is DenMune very sensitive to changes in K?
That's actually one of the interesting things about DenMune.
Okay.
While the choice of K does matter, DenMune is surprisingly robust to changes in this parameter.
Okay.
The authors of the paper found that DenMune produced consistent results over a fairly wide range of K values.
So we don't need to spend hours agonizing over finding the absolutely perfect value of K.
Exactly.
That's a relief.
Yeah, it is.
I'm all for algorithms that make our lives easier.
That's one of the things that makes DenMune so appealing.
Okay.
It's powerful and effective, but it's also relatively easy to use.
Right.
You don't need to be a clustering expert to get good results.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's like a high-performance sports car.
Right.
That's surprisingly easy to drive.
I like that analogy.
And it highlights another important aspect of DenMune. It's speed.
Yes, it's speed.
Yes. We were just talking about that before.
We were.
So is DenMune fast?
DenMune is quite fast, especially compared to some of those older, more complex algorithms.
Right.
Remember, it has a very streamlined approach to finding clusters. It doesn't need to do a lot of complicated calculations.
Okay, that's good to know.
It is good to know.
Speed is always a concern when working with large data sets.
It is.
So to recap, we've got an algorithm that's robust, good at handling noise, effective on complex data sets, and relatively easy to use.
And fast.
And it's fast, too.
Yes.
I'm starting to think this DenMune thing is the real deal.
I think it has a lot of potential.
Yeah.
It addresses some of the key challenges that we face with traditional clustering algorithms. And it does so in a way that's both elegant and efficient.
Well said. But before we get too carried away, let's take a step back and consider the bigger picture. Where does DenMune fit in the grand scheme of things?
That's a great question.
Is it a revolutionary breakthrough? Or is it just another tool in the data scientist's toolbox?
That's a great question, and one that deserves careful consideration.
Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily call DenMune a revolution.
Okay.
But it definitely represents a significant step forward.
So it's an evolution, not a revolution.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay.
Remember, the field of data analysis is constantly evolving.
Right.
Researchers are always looking for new and better ways to analyze and understand data.
Right.
DenMune builds upon the work of previous algorithms like CMune and C#, which also explored the idea of mutual nearest neighbors, but it refines that approach and addresses some of the limitations of those earlier algorithms.
So it's standing on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly.
But it's also making its own unique contribution.
That's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah.
It's not just a rehash of old ideas, but a thoughtful and innovative approach that pushes the boundaries of what's possible with clustering.
This is what makes exploring these new algorithms so fascinating.
It is.
We get to see how the field is progressing and how researchers are constantly pushing the boundaries.
Absolutely.
And what's even more exciting is that DenMune isn't just confined to the realm of academic research.
Exactly.
It has the potential to be a valuable tool for anyone working with data, regardless of their technical expertise.
Absolutely.
So it's not just for data scientists with PhDs.
No, not at all.
You're saying that everyday people, like our listeners, could actually benefit
they could
from using DenMune.
Absolutely.
Imagine a small business owner who wants to understand their customer base better.
Right.
They could use DenMune to segment their customers into distinct groups based on purchasing habits, demographics, or any other relevant data they have.
Exactly.
Or a marketer who wants to target their advertising campaigns more effectively.
Exactly.
They could use DenMune to identify groups of customers with similar interests and tailor their messaging accordingly.
That's a great point.
I hadn't even considered that.
Yeah.
So DenMune is like a Swiss Army knife for data analysis.
It is.
It can be used for all sorts of things.
It can be used for a lot of things.
This has been a fantastic discussion.
It has been.
We've gone from the technical details of how DenMune works to all sorts of real-world applications.
Yeah.
I'm eager to hear your thoughts on what this all means for the future of data analysis.
Right.
But I think we'll save that for our final part.
Sounds good.
Join us next time.
All right.
As we wrap up our exploration of DenMune. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into DenMune.
Okay.
I'm really excited to continue our conversation.
All right.
And hear what you think about the bigger implications of this algorithm.
Okay.
It seems like DenMune has the potential.
It does.
To be a really powerful tool.
Yeah, we've talked about its strengths
right.
in handling noisy data and finding those complex clusters.
Right.
But I think what's most exciting is how DenMune could be applied in various fields.
We touched on some potential use cases last time, like customer segmentation and targeted marketing.
Right.
But what other areas come to mind?
Well, one area where I see DenMune making a big impact is in anomaly detection. Its ability to identify and isolate those data points that don't conform to typical patterns could be really valuable for spotting unusual or suspicious activity.
Interesting. Can you give me a specific example of what you mean?
Think about cybersecurity.
Okay.
You're constantly trying to find those subtle signals that might indicate a hacker trying to break into a system.
Right.
DenMune could be used to analyze network traffic or system logs, looking for those small deviations from the norm that could signal an attack.
So it's like having a security guard who's trained to spot anything out of the ordinary.
Exactly.
Even if it's hidden amongst a ton of normal activity.
That's a good way to put it.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it's not limited to cybersecurity.
Okay.
You could use DenMune for fraud detection in financial transactions or even for spotting equipment malfunctions in industrial settings.
Okay, yeah.
Anywhere where identifying those rare but critical events is essential.
So DenMune could be used to sort of separate the signal from the noise.
Exactly.
Helping us focus on those events that really matter.
Precisely.
Okay.
And here's another thought. DenMune's ability to handle complex and messy data sets could be a game changer in personalized medicine.
Oh, personalized medicine is such a fascinating field.
It is.
How do you see DenMune fitting into that?
Imagine being able to analyze a patient's genetic data, medical history, lifestyle factors, and even their microbiome. All those intricate and interconnected pieces of information. And then using DenMune to identify distinct subgroups of patients who might respond differently to treatments or have unique risk profiles.
So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, we could use DenMune to tailor treatments to each individual patient's characteristics.
That would be incredible.
That would be incredible.
It would be a major step forward.
Yeah.
DenMune could help us move away from broad generalizations and towards more targeted and effective healthcare interventions.
It's amazing to think about the potential impact
it really is.
DenMune could have in so many different areas.
And I think we've only just scratched the surface of what's possible. As researchers continue to explore and refine DenMune, I'm sure we'll see even more innovative applications emerge.
I can't wait to see what the future holds for DenMune.
Me neither.
It's been an incredible journey.
It has.
Learning about this algorithm, from its inner workings to its potential to shape the future of data analysis.
It's been a pleasure diving into DenMune with you.
And with you, our listeners.
Absolutely.
We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity.
Yes.
About the power of algorithms.
And the exciting possibilities they hold for understanding our world.
Right.
Remember, the field of data analysis is constantly evolving.
Always.
So keep exploring.
Keep asking questions.
Keep asking questions.
And who knows?
And who knows?
Maybe you'll be the one.
Maybe you'll be the one.
To discover the next groundbreaking algorithm.
Until next time, keep diving deep.